Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and today I'm so excited to continue in part 2 of the Kashering Our Home series. In part 1, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, we talked about and showed you the process of making our kitchen kosher. That really involves doing the stove and the oven and the sink and the counters, and it was a really interesting and cool process that we got to take part of. And today, in this week's video, I want to talk about the second part of the kashering process, which was making the existing dishes we had as if they were brand new, a neutralizing experience, so to speak. Because if you have dishes, if we had come in with only brand new dishes into our home, if myself and my roommates had only had brand new dishes that had never been used, we'd only have to go to part 3, which you will see in the future, the part where we take the dishes to the mikveh. But since we all came in with dishes that had been used previously with varying levels and degrees of kashrut, we had to make them as if they were brand new. We had to do this neutralizing process. In order to help us with this process, we had the amazing Rabbi Michoel Fleischmann come into our home. Rabbi Fleischmann is the Rabbinic Coordinator at the Scroll K, which is the sort of local kosher certifying agency. So he came into our home. You will see him throughout this video. And he brought, essentially, there are different ways to kasher the pots, the pans, the utensils, the plates, the dishes we had in our home. And it's sort of based off the concepts we talked about in the previous part of this series, where essentially the way that something would be made unkosher is the way that you make it kosher. So if it's made unkosher by heat, you apply heat to it. Most of the things in this video you will see ended up going into pots of boiling water to make them hot enough that everything is sort of removed and made as if it was new. And some things required a blowtorch, which is also really interesting to see. That would be for things where there would be holes too small in the utensils in order to sort of see if there is food stuck. So you sort of just burn it all off and then call it good. So we had a lot of questions about what dishes can we kasher, because some materials can be kashered easily, some materials can be kashered, but it's a difficult process, and some materials just cannot be kashered. And so we had a lot of questions for Rabbi Fleischmann about what dishes it is that we could kasher.
If you took a poll of kasher organizations, you'd probably have about 95% to kasher plastic, and even if they tell you they don't, they do. Oh. Let me explain. Most modern factories have pipes going all over the place. Some of those pipes are PVC, some of them are other types of plastic, and even if they use only metal pipes, such as steel, every gasket is not even rubber, it's plastic.
Yeah. Wow.
So they'll tell you they don't, but they actually do, just because that's how things are made. Wow. If you ask a synagogue rabbi, it'll be about 50-50. Yeah. Some will, some won't. So the issue has to do with the fact, obviously it's a new material. What is it, like 100 years old or something?
Yeah,
First plastic or something?
1940s or something.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah,
so what do you do with it? What category do you put into? Okay, so that's the general question. So Rabbi Michoel Fleischmann, who actually answered a lot of these questions and was basically one of, or maybe the major authority in the United States, he said something about plastic that has two possible interpretations. He said something about being strict about plastic, and either he meant for Pesach, don't kasher it, or he meant around the year, don't kasher it. So most understood him to mean don't kasher for Pesach, but the rest of the year, yes. Moshe Heinemann of the Star K understood him to mean any time of the year. But that being said, just as I said, every single factory out there is basically using plastic. It's not possible to not use it. It's just so the result of Moshe Heinemann's opinion is basically, if he can arrange from beforehand that they have different equipment for the kosher and not kosher, and just kasher the things that are like metal, etc., then he will. But if it is possible, then they'll use it anyway. Yeah, so we can kasher those things.
What? That is so cool.
Our mind we didn't know. We really didn't
because I was thinking about it from the halachic perspective of why you can kasher metals and not ceramic, or like not wood and other things. So like, I guess it's not porous. Like it's not. There's nothing's gonna get into it.
Yes and no. Okay. So, porosity. I don't know if that's a word.
Now it is.
Whatever it is, being porous, not being porous.
Yeah.
So that's an advantage and a disadvantage. Meaning, the halachic term is kabolo kach poto. What goes in comes out. So the assumption is basically the materials that the Torah talks about, such as the metals. That's what we're talking about. Anything that will come in will come out. It also mentions wood. We see it. What goes in comes out. Now, if you want to compare metal and wood, there's no comparison. A whole lot more goes into wood than metal, etc. Okay.
So also you can kosher wood?
Usually. If it's multiple pieces, sometimes they're like multiple strips.
We are learning so much.
Right? Okay, so that's the thing because it's like glued together. It's different.
Yeah.
Okay. But if it's basically a solid piece, you can.
And when it came to koshering ceramics, we also had been under the impression that you couldn't kosher them. And it is very difficult to kosher ceramic. And so it's not something you do very often. You really would save that for family heirlooms, things that are of enough significance that it's worth going through the trouble of koshering them to preserve them.
Now, that being said, earthenware, which says you can't, is actually not talking about our fired ceramics, which the Chinese figured out first. And then sort of the Greeks and the Persians. But when they talk about earthenware, they're talking about not that high temperature. It might be fired clay, but it's earthenware. It's not like the hard ceramic that's on that, because it took a long time for them to figure out how to do that.
Wow.
So we can do that?
Wait.
Oh, okay.
So, when the Gemara and it talks about what the Chumash is talking about, it's referring to that classic earthenware, which is basically incredibly porous. And that's the other end of it. If it's too porous, it goes in and doesn't come out.
Oh, because it just takes in.
Yeah. Now, a little bit will come out, and that's part of the problem, but you can't get everything out. Now, eventually, people figure out how to do ceramics. So what category do you put it into? So for the most part, most opinions are, since it is actually earthenware, and we're not quite sure exactly what it's doing in terms of porosity, then we won't kasher it. Or we'll only kasher it like a self-oven temperature, like 1,000 degrees, which may or may not break it, but it will definitely bring it up to the temperature that everything in it will be burnt out or off.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Now, there's a single opinion in the Yerushalmi that's called not the standard opinion, that says earthenware, it's not that you can't kasher, it's that it's very difficult, more like a piece of wood. Now, under certain circumstances, we will kasher ceramic in boiling water, but 3 times. Because that opinion says it's so hard, how do you solve the hard part? You do it multiple times.
Oh.
And that just like, if it was a cup, you would drop it in 3 times?
I let it get the temperature, take it out, so it gets in 3 times. That is, but again, that's not the standard, that's what we will do under particular circumstances.
So items with handles that don't attach, so think about like a pot or a knife or different utensils, items with handles that don't attach are fine. But there's an interesting nuance that if it's a multi-piece handle or if it attaches to the pot, for example, with specific types of screws, and it's possible that it's not all one piece, so like food could have gotten stuck in between the handle and the rest of the utensil, or between the handle and the pot, as an example, it maybe would need to be unscrewed, or you could just decide not to kosher it. But you'd have to sort of detach the pieces to see if there's any sort of residue inside those areas.
Do you have handled utensils? I'll show you in a moment why I'm asking.
Like knives?
It could be knives, either pots, even tongs.
Yeah.
Yes, take a look at them.
Some pots.
Because sometimes I use my propane torch just to get the spots I can't get to.
Okay.
These are all the knives.
Okay, you can leave them in there. That's
Okay.
fine. Okay, so most knives nowadays are wonderful in that even if they're split, they're not really.
Oh.
Like they're pretty whole. I mean, this is so firmly attached together, unless something like to really damage it, it's like very together.
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah.
Even something like this, so it literally was just like multiple pieces that they attached together still. It's like all one piece.
Okay.
Some of the more ancient wooden knives that I'm sure you've seen, in some places. So they start to split. Sometimes here, and sometimes over here.
Okay.
So some of those things you would say don't kasher, or perhaps if you don't mind damage. Oh, okay, sure. We can use a propane torch, but this is like really great.
Okay.
Also, a lot of the blades.
Nice. I don't know whose it is.
Okay, very smooth, which again is great in terms of kashering. And even serrated knives. Yeah, even serrated knives are usually like that's not much serration, meaning obviously food could collect there, but people wash it, use a dishwasher. I mean, usually there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But people would have old knives again with wooden handles start to split over here, or some of the serrations are really old serrations, and it's like really nicks. So in that situation, we definitely would use the fire to like burn off first. So you're not even kashering with the propane, really just burning off what's there. Oh, here we have.
Oh.
Do you want to save this?
No, it's fine.
It definitely has a gap here.
All right, to the Goodwill.
Yes.
Okay.
So here, Rabbi Fleischmann is showing us that this knife, you wouldn't be able to kasher without undoing it because it is 3 separate parts. It's wood, blade, wood again, and it's not all like one cohesive sealed division. There could be a little bit of a gap between those things, so you couldn't kasher without taking it apart.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and talking about handles again. So,
Okay.
Again, these are different pieces, but literally there is no gap.
Yeah.
I mean, nowhere.
Smooth. Yeah. Wow.
It's like all one piece. But not everything is like that.
Right, so like this kind of thing.
Okay, so do you want these kasher?
I saved them just to figure out what could be kosher or not. We weren't sure.
So it is possible. Let me ask first one question. What is the normal thing you cook in there? Like the regular type of thing?
This is usually like egg or this was a dairy.
So you normally put like an oil in there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can kasher in the water, but really should remove that handle.
Oh.
So I can get inside there.
So items with big holes, think like a spatula, are okay to kasher with boiling water because you can clearly see that there's no food stuck between the parts. But something like a grater, you really cannot tell if there's food maybe stuck in there. And those are the things that the blowtorch would be used for. Those things where there are those small enough areas that you can't really tell what's happening. That when there are sort of gaps between an item, that's when you bring the blowtorch out.
Okay, yeah, no, very good question. Okay, so this is
You do have a blowtorch though. Oh.
very good distinction here. So these are both holed. Okay, now the big difference is these are big holes. Usually things don't get caught there, at least when you wash it, it comes straight off. Here, that's not so obvious. I mean, even if I look like this, you don't actually necessarily can see all the little bits and pieces. So for something like this, I will use a propane torch for. I will tell you, it'll probably discolor it.
I think these bad boys.
Oh, yes, exactly.
That's cool.
Okay, so you see, not much came off, which is great, but you don't know unless you do it.
Right. Oh.
Yep. Good.
You
see, it did discolor just a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's
not bad.
Deferring too.
Should you know the inside of the crust? I don't think coffee.
You're welcome. So I am going to use the propane on this bottom part.
Oh.
Because if you notice, it is literally a gap.
Yeah.
Usually it's relatively clean, but sometimes some things come out. So
Okay.
cool.
So for the egg beaters, we had to use the propane. We had to burn them because if you think about the handle of something they use to beat eggs up, it's a coil. And in that coil, you have gaps in which it would be really hard to clean between or to make sure that there isn't any food or any residue. And so that's, again, why we burn it off. Rabbi Fleischmann also taught us about kashering pots, including our Instapot.
Okay.
So, for like something like an Instapot, we have 2 of those actually. Would
Yeah.
it just be the lid as well as the pot
Okay,
inside?
so basically it's a couple step process because of how it's designed. So the lid is removable, right? So we can literally put it into the boiling water. Okay. This is all removable. Again, I can put it into the water I have. This is a combination of the machine and the pot. I have to refer to it as the oven. So first of all,
We'll have to
clean that out.
Yeah.
Okay. After these parts are kashered, actually turn it on with some. And what will be the longest cycle? This goes on.
Be for hours.
You can't do more than 3 hours, I think, because I tried to use it as a crock pot.
Oh, so it didn't work. Right. Okay. So basically, once these parts are kashered, fill this with some water and then put on for the longest cycle, and that will kasher this part.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool.
Because otherwise, how are you supposed to do anything with it?
Okay.
Right?
Okay, thanks.
We also learned about koshering cloth items, so a bread bag or hand towels for the kitchen, tablecloths. We weren't sure what the status of those things were, so it was really interesting to learn about that as well.
Bread bag.
So how do you use that bread bag? You just store it
I just
for...
put bread in there. But the bread hasn't always been like textured. It's just come from like the grocery store.
So the truth is, it doesn't need kashering.
Yeah.
If they're crumbs or something, you might want to just get rid of them. It can be washed also.
Okay.
You should also chew, like, let's say towels or stuff you use in the kitchen. So there are people who actually have like milkig and Fleischmann like towels and things.
Yeah.
It's not really necessary except that they haven't been cleaned. Meaning, any particular time, you're going to want to have it just one or the other. But once you wash it,
Cool. Good to know.
So this is where the koshering actually begins. Rabbi Fleischmann had been boiling these big tubs of water on our stove, and then what he did is, you're going to see, he puts on these multi-layers of gloves, and he takes all of our utensils, and he takes the plates, and he takes the pots, and he drops them into the boiling water one at a time. And the idea is that whatever goes into the boiling water should be left in long enough that it will be as hot as the boiling water. So it's going to be so hot as if it was boiling, and once that part was done, he was able to reach back in with his gloves, take out the utensils, take out everything that we put into it, and put it into the sink in water, cold water, so that it would cool down so that we could then take it out. And that was step 1 of the koshering of the dishes. So again, it's a 2-part step. Everything that you're seeing in this video is the neutralizing process for things that had previously been non-kosher that we wanted to use in our kosher home. And then what you'll see in the next video that comes out in this series is us taking these now neutral dishes, as if they were new, to the mikveh to make them sort of ritually and spiritually ready to be used in our kosher home.
You're going to see me going in and out of gloves like constantly here. So they do different purposes. But in terms of safety, this gives me an extra layer. And then it looks like I have 2 gloves. They're actually 3 gloves.
Wow.
That's fully lined.
Oh, wow.
This is actually made to clean out fryers in a restaurant. Not while it's on, but relatively out. So for short periods of time, it can go to 400 degrees. Longer at 200 degrees. But that's the basic idea. So basically, it just needs to go in.
Wow.
It doesn't have to go for that long, meaning you basically want what you're koshering to be the same temperature as the water, which, in terms of if we are doing something very fast, it might be 15 seconds or so for something as small as these guys. But in terms of efficiency, you might have a big pot, right, and then put a lot of things in at once, which means it's going to stay in there for a little while.
Oh, cool. I know.
At this point, I'm not controlling which direction the blades are going. Put your hands in the sink.
Yeah.
Just beware of the blades.
Okay. Wow. So after all of these steps, after going through all of these processes of putting things into boiling water and blowtorching them, and Rabbi Fleischmann reviewing our entire kitchen and every piece of kitchenware that we owned, we were finally at the stage where everything was as if it was brand new, and then it was ready to be taken to the mikveh, which is what you will see in part 3 of this series. And once again, a big thank you to Rabbi Fleischmann for coming to our home. Rabbi Fleischmann spent about 4 hours in our house to make everything neutral again, to make it as if it was brand new. It's a lot of dedication, it's a lot of being on your feet and having your hands in hot things, and so we were really grateful and really appreciative to him and to the Scroll Cave for making this possible so that we could have a kosher home. I really hope that you learned something and enjoyed today's video. I wish you all a wonderful week, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.